Boomers versus millennials. Who will survive? Stay tuned and you'll find out maybe. Hey folks, welcome to Set Apart Homestead. This is Travis, the Prepared Homestead. So there's a big thing all over the internet that I'm too old or don't really care about. I only know this because I have children. Boomers and millennials. Maybe you've heard about it, calling anyone older than probably 30, 35 or 40 a boomer, which that's technically not correct, but that's what they call them. And then, of course, the old people and the middle-aged people are always down on all the millennials and how they don't know how to do anything and lazy and, on and on and on and on. So it's a big thing online right now, and so this video there's a little bit of fun to it. Okay, there's a lot of fun to it. There's a little tongue-in-cheek, So everything I say kind of take lightly, although I hope to actually provide some thoughtful information today. And I kind of got this idea from, one of my children. Boomers and millennials, and who would survive the apocalypse. Before we get started, I'd like to encourage you to subscribe to the channel below. Click on the little bell, that way you'll get notifications when I put out new content. And so you can stay on top of all the corny cheesiness from the almost boomer guy right here. Anyways, so like I said, I thought of this. I thought it might be a fun video to make. But I think that there's some legitimacy there, and it's something to kind of think about because we all, have our little age group, and that affects us in many ways of how we perceive things, the things going on in the world, preparedness, homesteading, and how it also affects us mainly in a physical sense, but also intellectually, wisdom, knowledge, things like that. So, I think there's also a serious side to this, as much as it's kind of fun to talk about it. But to let you know, I feel I come from a good position of talking about this because I am neither a boomer or a millennial. And I, quite frankly, don't care. Anyways. So, I'm trying to think of this and trying to be fair. I want to be fair, and I don't want to just put down one generation because it's kind of silly to do so. So I was trying to think of ideas and points to make in this, to be fair. But then also I started thinking, are we talking about just boomers or millennials or even Gen Xers in general, or are we talking about them from a specifically preparedness standpoint, meaning they are a prepper, they are a preparedness-minded, survivalist, whatever. I don't know. But, so to get into this, let's talk about boomers, for instance. The boomers, it's my parents' generation, and, they're the ones that are basically the seniors now. And I know that I have many of you that are my viewers. So the things that I'm going to say, if there's anything that you don't agree with or whatever, please don't take it personally, because you have to understand I'm generalizing things, okay? Boomers have a big advantage over my generation and my children's generation, especially from a preparedness standpoint. Some of their advantages are the fact that many of them no longer work. They're retired, and they can devote a lot more time to homesteading, time to preparedness. They have more time on their hands, generally speaking. Typically, from a financial standpoint, many of them are much more settled in a financial standpoint. Maybe their homes are paid off, their retirement. I understand many of you may be struggling as a senior, but generally speaking, most seniors are better off financially than folks my age or younger. So they have that advantage. They also have the advantage that their children are probably out of the home. They've grown up, married, and moved off. So now they only have to take care of the 2 of them, or just the 1. They don't have to worry about the children in the home of financially taking care of them and doing things to prepare for them. So they have that advantage. Probably one of the obvious advantages that they have is the fact that they grew up, one of the last generations to grow up, probably the last generation, although mine is kind of comes close, but the last generation that grew up without technology, really. It existed, but not at their fingertips like it exists today, you know, where you can literally find any information you wish to on a little handheld device. And they were the last generation to experience that, and even ones that grew up in a wealthier home to where they had the most modern conveniences at the time, they still are kind of nothing compared to what exists today. So the idea for many boomers to garden or to hunt or to live, you know, a simpler life is not too far off. You know, many of them did, and even the ones that didn't, they probably had family members or knew of people, grew up around people that still lived that way. So it's not a foreign concept for them. They also know what it is to work hard. Many of them, they had to work, you know, very physically laborious jobs. They had to work, maybe several of them, whatever it was, they had to work hard to get where they're at today. And so they have that advantage. The disadvantages, though, and I'm probably leaving out things, I know. This isn't, you know, a complete list. Disadvantages would be obviously their age. While many people that fall into the boomer category are very healthy and strong, and some of them certainly much stronger than I am physically. I've met some that they're in amazing health. The reality is that once you hit 60 years old, statistically, your health is going to start taking a downward tumble, little by little, some faster for others. And so they don't have the physical agility, the physical longevity to do the things that a younger person can do. And that becomes problematic, especially in the apocalypse. And I personally know many preppers, preparedness-minded survivalists that are amazingly knowledgeable. And they have the equipment, they have everything they need, but they tell me that they worry because they know their body is failing them. And if something happened, even though they have all the knowledge and they have skills and they have the things, they worry that will their body be able to function to actually do the things that they need to do. So there's a big disadvantage there. And I know it's worrisome. Now, like I said, there are many that fall in the boomer generation that are very healthy. And so those of you that fall into that generation and that are very serious about preparedness, I would encourage you to look at ways to improve your health. Just because you've passed 60 doesn't mean that it's physically time for you to just give up. Research, in fact, and I shouldn't say this because I can't remember the source, but I did read from a legitimate source that medically speaking that the boomer generation is called the unhealthy generation. That they, out of all the generations currently living, they have the most health problems. So that is certainly something to think about, and you should try to do the things that you need to do to improve your health. Don't just give up just because, well, I hit 60 years old, it's time for me to sit down and, watch TV all the time. Try as much as you can to keep motivated, to keep mobile, to exercise and to manage your health because, again, no matter how much knowledge you have and how much equipment you have, if your body fails you during the apocalypse, well, it doesn't matter what you have. So do the things that you can to improve that. And In the end, I think the boomers have a big advantage. And for those that are still in really good health, I think that they have the highest advantage over all the generations that currently live right now when it comes to facing an apocalypse. So I think that's probably the one deciding factor is health. As long as your health is intact, I think that they hold the lead by far. So now let's get over and let's talk about millennials. Oh, millennials. But before I do that, quick commercial break. I know some of you hate this, and I do too, but posting a video on Patreon. And if you want to check it out, you can go down below in the description and there's a link to it. And it'll be just an update on some thoughts and some actual information on what's happening in Virginia with the gun control stuff that the governor and the legislature are trying to cram down the throats of the Virginians, the Commonwealth of Virginia. Anyways, so millennials. I have children that are millennials. Just barely. They just fall into that, just old enough to fall into that category of millennials. This is the first generation that grew up pretty much, the entire generation grew up with technology. So we had the last generation that grew up without it, and this is the first generation that really grew up with it. In my generation, it existed a little bit, but it really didn't kind of come into full force till I was in my teenage years. And even then, it was way more limited than it is now, but it was the first time we started seeing computers in the home and things like that when I was hitting 15, 16 years old. And of course now it's gone crazy. Computers are even old-fashioned anymore, at least home computers, like what I was used to. So you have this generation that they've grown up completely on technology for the most part. But what advantages do they have? Well, number one, their biggest advantage is the biggest disadvantage of a boomer. They have their health, typically speaking, and I know, again, I'm generalizing. So they typically have their health. They're at the optimal point in their lifespan of healthiness, between their 20 and 30 years old. That's typically considered your optimal time for health. After 30, things start kind of trickling a little bit more down for a lot of people. So they're strong, they have strength, they have the ability to do things that an older person will just wear themselves out on. They will tire out much more quickly, whereas this, millennials, that they can just keep going along. They have the information. This is the most informed and educated generation, or at least that was the first one. And then they've got the little younger generation, and they'll probably follow in their footsteps. So they have information at their fingertips. Any question that they have, they can look it up instantly. Amazing amounts of information that even in my generation we didn't know. My children, they know things that I don't know, that I just flat out don't know. How do they know it? Because the information is out there more. One of the advantages that I see, or something that at least I notice, and this shows true statistically, is that the millennials and then the younger generation, which I guess is the Generation X that's coming up behind the millennials, seem to be, not all of them, but many of them seem to be much more aware of what's going on. I think my generation was the first generation to really wake up to what was really happening in the world around us, to wake up of how, government was really, how it all really worked, waking up to see who was really in power. And then now the millennial generation, some of them, not all, but some of them are really getting it. They're becoming very politically active. Some of them for the left and some of them for the right. But the point is that they're very awake. Now, they may be misinformed at times on why they're awake, but the fact is that their mind tends to be open to a point more so than previous generations. So I kind of tend to think that is an advantage. Disadvantages, though, they're not as financially stable most of the time. So they're not able to devote the resources it takes to become more prepared. They depend too much on the technology, and that is a big one. They depend a lot on the technology. And so instead of actually knowing how to do something through practice skills, through muscle memory, through wisdom, where they have taken that knowledge and added it to experience and created wisdom, all they have is what's at their fingertips. And while they may be able to come up with vast amounts of more information than a boomer, do they know how to apply that information to real world situations? And that's the big key, especially when it comes to survival. You may know 50 different ways to start a fire without matches, but if you've actually done any of those and practiced them, they may not be useful to you at all, just because you're able to pull that up on a little screen. So that could be a disadvantage. The amount of knowledge that they have and at their fingertips that's an advantage can also be a disadvantage, because it's all based on this little device, for the most part, that is fragile. In an apocalyptic situation, it's very possible that that little electronic device will no longer function. And if that's where all of their knowledge comes from, then what do? They can't Google it. So there's definitely a disadvantage there. Another disadvantage is one that's debatable. And I wasn't going to mention it, but I'm going to, because I know someone, or at least a bunch of you in the comments, are going to mention it. And this is one that I don't fully agree with. And the idea that millennials are just lazy, and that they don't have a good work ethic, and that they're not tough enough. I agree with that to a point, but I hate to say that because that's so generalizing, and I know many instances of millennials that do work their hind ends off, that are tough, that they work hard, they have a great work ethic, and for their age, without the 40 plus years experience added on, they're quite tough. And they may not have lived through the same experiences as a boomer or even one from the greatest generation, but for their age, they are quite tough. And my kids are examples of that. The ones that are millennials, they are examples of that. And so I hate to say that, because while you can find many cases of millennials that fit that, you can also find many millennials that are they themselves are waking up to another thing, is like, I don't want to be like the people around me. I want to be strong. I don't want, they see the weaknesses of their generation, and so they're trying really hard to overcome that. And for that, I praise them, because they're doing their best to overcome that. So in the end, who has the biggest advantage? A millennial or a boomer? Honestly, I don't know. I think personally, if I was going to be out into the wastelands in an apocalyptic situation and I could only be with one person, I think I would probably choose a boomer. Because my personal life experience tells me and has shown me that generation is much more well equipped to live in this and survive it and overcome and be tough than a millennial. But by the time, if something doesn't happen soon, as far as the world ending, when it does, there may not be a lot of boomers left, so it may not even matter, because the top end of the boomers are definitely hitting that age of life that they're starting to die off. Anyways, I didn't make this video to offend anyone, so I hope that it doesn't, but I would like to see some conversation going, some good discussion going on this, because I think it's something worth talking about. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.